Welcome to the Manufacturing Shakeup. We're your hosts, Ellen Feldman Ornato
and Jenny Drescher. We're talking with dynamic women from across the manufacturing scene in Connecticut.
So, Jenny, you and I are going to be having this whole 20 minutes to ourselves today to talk about something that is near and dear to our hearts, which is like the number one skill that I think people need to develop to move themselves forward in their careers. And it's networking.
Networking. The number one skill. That's interesting. I feel like them's fighting words, Elle. Because I don't know if it's the number one skill. So, but I'm gonna yes and you and say that it's a wicked important skill. So, but I think actually it's the number one skill totally resonates with me because I've had a big issue with this myself recently as a person who is way more introverted than people think I am. Like we do all this talking and, speeches and keynotes and conference and stuff at Boulder Company. We are out in the field a lot. And what people tend to think is, oh, well, that must mean you're very extroverted. But I dig being by myself behind my computer and I'm a high creative and I like to hang out in that space. But I can fall into this huge trap of staying at home instead of being in the world, making myself available and making myself visible and just connecting with people. And so the insight I had this morning while I was noodling and journaling on this was that networking for me, one, I hate that word. Just for the record, for other people out there who hate that word, you are not alone. I also hate that word. It's a word that makes me cringe and makes me go, I hate that word. But really, the new lens that I'm putting on it for all of those reasons and more is I want to put myself in a position where I'm making myself available for the things I want in life to be happening through connections with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Which I realize sounds very super woo, and I'm a little bit of a spirit bonker woo person, so I'm not going to apologize for that. But life, I don't get to be in the world if I hide behind my computer. And
exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll stop babbling like that, but I wanted to share that with you because you seem always to be a person that just seems like you're completely at ease in so many of these situations for networking, and you and I are very different in that way.
Yeah. So, I would say that as a human, I'm much more extroverted. I get energy from being with people, and I don't mind walking into a room where I know no one. And I also recognize that most people aren't wired like that I meet. And those are actually the skills of being effective inside of places where people are gathering for business purposes is something that has evolved over time because I am a much more competent human now than I was when I was in my 20s and starting my career. I was much more likely to sit at a table next to somebody I knew all night and talk just to that person than to get up and walk around the room and feel comfortable approaching people I didn't know. So it's really a skill that I've evolved over time. And I think that it's something that every guest who's in the middle of their career or more senior talks about is that they've built their career through relationships. Mm-hmm. And that's what I heard from what you just said, right? If I'm not in the world and I'm not connecting with people, I'm not going to make the connections that allow me to build my professional career. Mm-hmm. Not to mention you meet amazing people along the way who become close personal friends, right? I think one of the reasons that people don't go to networking events, or when I say networking events, I mean Christine Marcin, who was here talking about the women in manufacturing events, or PMA, or any of the, the Society of Professional Engineers, or SMPS, which is people in architecture, engineering, construction, or chambers of commerce, or.
Right. Yeah. The list goes on and on and on and on. Yeah.
Right. But the thing is that when you go to those meetings and the assumption when you go into the meeting is you have something in common with those people that creates a starting point to create and find people who are in sort of the same creative space as you and to figure out how they're doing what they're doing. If you don't go and you're not seen, then you're not there. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but so many people are so hesitant to go because they don't know what to do first. So I think that's a great transition to say, when you and I started intersecting for business purposes, what were the kinds of things that you did to help you get more comfortable in networking environments? If it doesn't come naturally to you, what are the kinds of things that you did or do?
So one of my favorite tricks, and this has worked incredibly well, is that to play hostess at somebody else's event. So like if I'm at an event where I'm having sort of one of my more introverted moments and I'm like, oh, why am I here? And I've got that like draggy energy. I will flip the lid on that energy and I'll be like, you know what? I am not the only person in this room who's probably feeling that right now. So I'm going to go get what I need out of this situation. Like, so that's another dimension of this, is that like, there are so many like talk tracks out in the world about quote unquote how we're supposed to do networking, right? There's this rule, there's that rule, there's this rule. And like everybody and their mother has 1,000,001, like if you look, you could Google search it right now and you'll get 100 books, right? But the rule that I started to follow for myself was be a little greedy and a little selfish about like, what is it that I need right now in this moment? Because I'm going into this environment wherever I may be, and something about it is not working for me in this moment in time, which means that that's how I'm showing up, if that's the headspace that I'm in. And how does that actually advance me building relationships, right? So I started with like, what do I need to do for me right now? And a little more permission to be a little more, I don't know. I'm not going to call it selfish as if it's a bad thing, because I don't think selfish is a bad thing, but like a little more oriented towards taking care of my own self in that moment. Right. And that led me to saying, well, who else in the room is not feeling great? And I met some amazing people over the years with that approach. Like,
so what would you actually say to somebody?
Well, when I say, I have said stuff like, there was one person that I went over to at a big event in Hartford one time, and he was standing across the room, sort of looking like a deer in headlights. And he's like, look, he just looks so uncomfortable. And I was like, and I walked right over to him. I said, you look as uncomfortable and bored as I am right now. Let's have a conversation. And he just like got this sweep of relief over his face. And he's like, it's like, yeah, like, these things are really hard. And we got into this whole like amazing, great conversation about like what worked or what didn't in that moment.
Yep.
And then that worked really well. And then another way that I did it, like on the hosting side, was, I think it was it was also a Hartford event. There was a woman who was sort of wandering around, clearly not sure, like, where do I go? What do I do? Is there a seat at the table for me? Is there room at the inn? And I was like, you look a little lost. Have you met so-and-so? And I like grabbed her hand and I pulled her over to somebody that I did know. And I said, so this is the network. This is what it's about. Have you met this person? And like, we all breathed and it just made it easier.
What I love about that is there's an act of kindness in that as well. As much as you characterize it as a little bit selfish, like going up to somebody who clearly looks like they're lost and giving them access to a conversation that they don't have to start is a real act of generosity. So, give yourself a pat on the back.
I'll take that. I'll take that. I never thought about it that way. I guess it is. Yeah.
Right. So, and the other thing that I think is important is that there's a perception out there that I have to go into the room and I have to sell something to someone, right? That I have to somehow sell myself. Right. So there's a lot of stuff out there like you have to have a 30-second elevator pitch and it has to be slick and it has to capture the essence of who you are. And you have to sound natural saying it, which is ridiculous
And
Because
like
most
honestly,
people,
even when you describe that, I'm exhausted by hearing that description.
right?
Right? So I bet
So,
there's a lot of folk out there that are like, yeah, no, that sounds like no, just no.
and and I think it's really daunting to be able to do that on the spot. That's part of the reason early on when we started working together that some of the first workshops we spun up were for people to get more comfortable being seen and heard and in one-on-one conversations while there were other people and distractions around, to give them more confidence that they could talk to somebody about nothing and not die.
Mhm.
Right? Because what we were seeing repeatedly is people would go to these events, they'd be asked to stand up and introduce themselves, and all of the blood would drain out of their faces, and
Yep.
they were tongue tied, and you could tell they needed a drink of water, and you just felt bad for them, which was not at all who those people were. It was a sort of a lack of comfort and preparation for what they were put on the spot to do. And so people want to avoid that at all costs. So I think that
Mm.
there's a lot of sort of giving yourself the grace to walk into the room, to be who you are, and to set a low bar like, I just need to meet one person tonight. And this is for the people who are uncomfortable with the idea of going into these social situations that are business networking. And like, what is expected of me? Well, go into it expecting to meet one person. I would also say that another strategy for me, although that I really love these kinds of environments, there are definitely times when I walk in and I'm like a number 3 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of energy.
Well, and some environments are totally like unmanageable. There was an event that you and I went to last year that
I
I mean,
remember.
we walked into the main room, and I swear to God, not an exaggeration, there were probably 500 people in the room.
And we
And
both went, oh my God.
yeah. And so that like you're making me think about the idea that one one piece of the picture in terms of being able to, you mentioned preparedness, right? Like so you made the comment about whether or not people know what to do or they're prepared. And I love the idea of having somebody just say, I'm just going to meet one person, like, and just release all that pressure,
Mhm.
right? That definitely has worked for me. I'm glad you're sharing that with our listeners. And the other thing about that, if we intersect do less, like you're talking about do less, like don't try so hard is the
Mhm.
core of the idea I hear you expressing. And I think that's super important because if we don't try so hard, then we're able more to listen to ourselves and make our own decisions about what's right for us in these situations. Instead of
Yes.
feeling like they have to follow somebody's rule book,
Mhm.
folks have the option to ask what's right for me. And that includes what is the nature of the event? What is the size of the event? What's going to help me feel like I'm being set up for success? Because when you and I walked into that room, and we literally, I mean, it was literally, if so, anybody out there that's ever seen like the movie Armageddon where the thing blows up and it like pushes the particles across the sky or whatever it was. Think of any sci-fi movie where you've seen a scene where some big thing blew up and it pushed everything else out of the way. That was Ellen and me at this event. We literally walked into the room. Yeah, it was like this explosion. And we're like, yeah, we are, and that we almost fled. And we are people who do this for a living. And we
Mhm.
were like, okay, peace out. I don't know about, I mean, we stayed for like
I
an hour.
Yeah, that escalator down was just calling my name from the moment I got off of it. No. And so
Yeah.
what we did, if I recall, is we met this one really nice woman who works at a bank in Farmington or Glastonbury, and we
Yep.
talked to her for like 15 minutes until we could get more grounded because there was a lot of ambient noise. There were a
Yep.
lot of people crammed into one space because the main room wasn't yet open for like the event that was about to happen. And it was too many people in a small space.
Yep.
And
She
so,
was also on the edge, by the way.
yes,
She was like
that's
one of the, it was like watching it was like watching a bunch of people who weren't jumping into the pool. Like there was
we
this whole
picked her
sort of,
off of the periphery and said, "You look uncomfortable too. Come talk to us."
right?
And this conversation isn't meant to scare you into never going to a networking event because we're telling you about all of these. But the thing is that there's low hanging fruit. there are low stress environments that you can opt in. I remember going to a WIM event last year, and we went on a tour of a plastic injection molding plant that, we were in groups of 3 or 4, and then we went and got ice cream.
So like chill, pun intended, like just
so easy.
Very relaxed, so easy. Yeah. I don't think you're putting people off from networking. I think it's important for us to be having more conversations about redesigning what we even mean by networking and opening up more space for people to do right by themselves. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like throughout my career, I've gotten so many messages about like the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it, the pressure way to do that. You're supposed to like follow the numbers and go to a certain number of things, a certain amount of time, and you have to do it a certain way. It's like that. It's sort of the same note that you're talking about with like, you have to have an elevator pitch and like walk up to somebody and shake their hand and make sure you get all these cards and just like, all this stuff. And I feel under pressure to do those rules, or I should say. I used to feel under pressure to do those rules. And then when I decided to give myself permission to do it on my own terms, that really just started to be a game changer for me. And even today, as I was reflecting on this topic this morning, I was like, oh, like I get to put whatever lens I want on it for my purposes. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of people in our audience who, I hope that idea serves.
Yeah.
I also want to know something, because you're more at ease in these spaces and more extroverted, and like you're able to just like be more, you just access that very much more easily. What do you think about these times when we are meeting somebody who's very extroverted and they're, I don't want to say over the top in a bad way, but like you sort of, we meet people who are, it almost feels disingenuous, right? Like we can meet somebody who's so much of a natural rapid fire connector, mm-hmm. which I think you're a connector, but I've never seen you come across as fake. But I've definitely met people who are like, there's almost a glad handing quality.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about, I don't know, because you don't do that, but we've met people who do that. What do you think are good approaches for people in situations where they're sort of dealing with that energy from somebody else?
Well, there's a couple. I think for me, you say I don't do that, but there are times when I think I do that. So it's being self-aware. On the how do I network effectively side, it's being self-aware when you're talking too much. I heard a phrase a long time ago, be more interested than interesting. Mm-hmm. Ask more questions of other people than you talk about yourself. I think Liz talked about 80% of the time you want to be asking them questions and getting information about them. And then maybe 5% is a little bit of this is who I am. And, I think the people who talk too much and are like overtly kind of obnoxious,
right?
That it could be nerves on their part, that they're overselling themselves.
Yeah.
It could be that they lack the self-awareness to understand how they land for other people, and take their card anyway and send them a note privately. My experience with people who show up with a lot of bluster at big events is that when you get them one-on-one in a virtual call or you meet for coffee, they're an entirely different, more relatable person than they were in that big environment. So just as much as you and I might sort of kind of ease to the wall to get grounded before we go back into the room, some people come into the room with a lot of proving energy. Mm-hmm. That I think comes from a space of, I have to show up in a certain way as well.
Yep.
And to the extent that we can just all lower the bluster and be more interested in other people, it just creates more openings for us to have more meaningful conversations. And networking is the long game.
Yeah.
I never go into an event expecting to transact business, to meet somebody that's then going to turn into a business development. It's just not how I walk through the world. I expect to meet somebody that may, in a year or more, become a conversation. You know what I mean? It's more of a like, how do I start to cultivate a relationship? Whoever I meet in a 5-minute conversation in a networking event is likely to be a coffee meeting or a virtual meeting where we explore how we can be of service to each other. Right. And that's what I'm expecting in networking. I'm not expecting to sell you anything. I'm definitely not expecting you to sell me something. And if you try to, I'm kind of like run, Simba, run, because it's very off-putting.
Right. Yeah.
And again, it's like, how can I be the most chill, relaxed, interested version of myself in this environment? The other thing is to give myself permission not to go. So, sometimes I overstuff my calendar with networking events because
I never do that. I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about overloading my calendar. None of our audience does either. No, none of us ever do that. Nope, not our producer Gail. She never does it either. Nope,
ever,
never. No.
Sometimes I just have to give myself permission not to go, even if I spent money to go, because I know that the version of me that's going to show up at that meeting or that event is going to be a depleted version of me, and that's not who I want out there.
Yeah.
Or I have to listen to some amazing music in the car before I go in. That really gets me
always
out of my phone and into my body and feeling positive. And
Yep. It's interesting. You mentioned proving energy, right? So proving energy for our audience, what we mean by that, it's a Boulderism. It's something that we say inside Boulder Company. And when we're talking about proving energy, what we mean is, and just reflect for a minute, because we've all been this person and we all know this person, more than one person, where we sort of are coming into a situation or a conversation where we want to make sure that people know XYZ about us, right? Like it could be that sometimes we're that person when we're really insecure. For most adults, I think there's like a curve that people go through maybe in their 30s and their 40s, where there's a lot of proving energy in how we show up, because we are in competition with others and we may not be feeling so secure. So proving energy tends to look like somebody who makes sure that they stick their title into every conversation, or I'm trying to think other signals of proving energy are like
scene stealing.
Scene stealing. Yeah. And so the proving energy that Ellen is referencing, I think, is important for us to pay attention to when it comes to ourselves and our management of expectations as we go into networking events. You just said, I want to manage my expectation. I want to manage how I show up. And maybe I just go to like have one nice conversation with one person, and maybe I just go based on my own energy. And if we are having a day when we're feeling wicked and secure, we're 10 times more likely to bring proving energy into the room.
Absolutely.
Right. So I love that you dropped that in, because that is also something that is going to leave us and the people we meet feeling kind of funky and a little off. Like, I think I need to go and like have a shower or something. I just got this weird energy on me, and I don't know what it was, and I don't know what to do with it. Yeah, exactly. Get it off. Right.
Yeah. So I don't want to steal your scene on proving energy, but I'm noticing how long this segment is running. Have you been taking notes to come up with the shake-up factors from our conversation?
Wow. So I'm going to hear shake-up factor number 1 that just fell out of your mouth, which was give myself permission to not go. Right? Like, I think that's wicked important. Is like, we have to monitor our energy and listen to what our gut says. Shake-up factor number 2 is what came out of my insight this morning, which was about just making myself available to life instead of hiding behind my computer. I think that's a piece
just
of it.
Do it.
It's like, well, I don't even think it is a just do it, because honestly, just do it energy is great for when you want to make yourself go for a run, a la the Nike slogan, right? But like the energy that is there for me when I think about show up for life is a little softer and a little kinder, right? Like, I want to make myself available to myself and other people to cultivate this life that we're all doing together as a community. Right. And that's a little different than just do it. Right. Which is usually what I have to say to myself when I really don't want to walk out of the house and go to the gym.
Yeah,
So
and I would say,
that would be shake-up factor two for me. What about you?
well, I would say the extend kindness to others,
Mm,
right? And show up from a place of serving and getting to know people at the level of who they are
mm-hmm.
will always put you in a good place in a networking event. If you're curious about people and you're kind and you're asking them who they are and trying to be of service, then you're always going to succeed. There's, in the world of succeed and fail, there is really no failing at networking except not going. But
Yeah.
in the succeeding piece is how can I show up in a way that has people know me for who and how I am, and hopefully that resonates with the right people, and we just trust that that takes us along a trajectory that's meant for us. That was even more woo-woo than you usually are.
I know. Well, that was like trust yourself, Luke. Trust the force.
All
Trust
right.
yourself. Trust the force, Luke.
Well, I think that wraps up our session of just you and me talking about networking. And yeah, I look forward to our next conversation like this.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. Reach out to us on social because we want to hear your thoughts about this topic.
Yeah. Thank you for coming to Manufacturing Shakeup. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturing Shakeup. You can listen to us each week on your favorite podcast app. You'll find us on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And if you use the hashtag MFG Shakeup, we will see them and really appreciate your spreading the word about what you're hearing and learning each week. Hey, Jenny, did I forget anything?
Yes, you did. Here's the most important bit. You may have learned something from that guest. They may have told a story about, oh, here's what I did and here how it worked. Here at the Manufacturing Shakeup, we are all about action. So take some nugget of what you heard today and put it into practice, even if it's small and experimental. Get busy, get dangerous, go shake stuff up and bring people along with you. Go take an action, post it on social media. Let's have some fun.
The Manufacturing Shakeup is sponsored by the Connecticut Office of Manufacturing, produced by Maselli Productions and Gale Communications, and hosted by the Boulder Company.